Since the Russia-Ukraine conflict began this February, this ship is the first ever to carry Ukrainian grain and sail from the port of Odessa.
With 26,000 tons of maize on board, the cargo ship is believed to bring relief to global food security as it heads toward global markets. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I'm CJ Hero.
And I'm Nina Brichielago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines.
Northern Luzon earthquake inflicts infra damage worth almost 600 million pesos. Philippines has no intention to rejoin the International Criminal Court ahead of its plan to resume the drug war probe. Filipinos mourn the death of former President Fidel Ramos. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi kicks off her Asian tour. Her arrival in Taiwan expected despite warnings from China. And U.S. President Joe Biden back in isolation after testing positive for COVID-19 again.
Joe Biden here, tested positive this morning.
The Department of Public Works and Highways structural assessment is still ongoing following an earthquake that jolted northern Luzon last week. To date, the estimated cost of damage to infrastructure has reached almost 600 million pesos. Madeline Villar Moratillo reports.
The damage to infrastructure caused by the powerful earthquake in northern Luzon has reached to 596.7 million pesos. Public Works and Highway Secretary Manuel Bonoan said the most costly infra damage, 474.1 million pesos in particular, was recorded in the Cordillera Administrative Region. Ilocos Region followed with 119.5 million pesos and Cagayan Valley with 3.1 million pesos. The tremor destabilized roads, bridges, and flood control structures. According to DPWH, clearing operations by the quick response teams continue to open the affected roads in Mountain Province, Kalinga, and Ilocos Sur. Meanwhile, the 1,350 structures hit by the quake were subjected to a rapid assessment by the department. This included 621 national bridges, 23 government hospitals, 275 public school buildings, 417 other public buildings, and 18 other structures. Of the 1,350 structures, 20 from Dakar and Ilocos regions have been declared restricted. Bonoan has instructed its city and municipal engineers to conduct their own assessment of public and private structures in their localities. Madeline Villar Moratillo reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Marquez administration is currently studying its next move to address efforts of the International Criminal Court to reopen its probe of the bloody war on drugs of the previous administration. But President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. clarified rejoining ICC is out of consideration. Eden Santos has the details.
The Philippines has no intention of rejoining the International Criminal Court or ICC. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. confirmed his recent meeting with his legal and diplomatic team, but the agenda did not include the countries rejoining the ICC. The chief executive said he recently met with Solicitor General Menardo Guevara, Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla, Chief Presidential Legal Counsel Juan Ponce Enrile, Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo, and Executive Secretary Victor Rodriguez, along with Attorney Harry Roque, to talk about the ICC prosecutor's plans to reopen its drug war probe in the country. The ICC has given the Philippines until September 8 to submit its reply to the query.
The Philippines has no intention of rejoining the ICC. Ang miniting namin ay dahil sinasabi ngayon na itutuloy ang investigasyon. Sinasabi naman namin may investigasyon naman dito. At patuloy rin naman ang investigasyon. Bakit magkakaroon ng ganon? So anyway, para alam natin ang gagawin natin, if we will respond, if we will not respond, kung sakali man sasagot tayo, ano magiging sagot natin, or possible din, hindi natin papansinin dahil hindi naman tayo sumasailalim sa kanila.
The president said ICC is a different kind of court and the legal team is studying and preparing to address its concern.
Pero the ICC is a very different kind of a court. Kaya pinag-aralan muna, sinabi ko sa inyo, pag-aralan nyo na mabuti yung procedure para tama yung gagawin natin. Kasi hindi natin, siyempre, kailangan baka ma-misinterpret yung ating mga ginagawa. Kaya liwanagin natin kung ano ba talaga ang dapat gawin, sinong susulat, kanino, anong ilalagay sa sulat, etc. etc.
Former President Rodrigo Duterte canceled the country's membership in ICC's founding treaty in March 2018. But under the ICC statute, it has jurisdiction over crimes committed between 2016 and 2019. Eden Santos reporting for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Philippines has recorded 24,000 new COVID-19 cases last week. Data from the Department of Health showed that the average of daily cases from July 25 to 31st reached 3,443. The number is 24% up compared to the July 18 to 24 period. 76 of the new cases were severe and critical, while 44 were added to the number of fatalities. Meanwhile, the positivity rate for COVID-19 in 14 areas of the country surpassed 20% on July 29. Octa research fellow Dr. Guido David said these include Albay, Cagayan, Camarines Sur, Cavite, Isabela, La Union, Laguna, Nueva Ecija, Pampanga, Pangasinan, Quezon, Rizal, Tarlac, and Zambales. Of these areas, Isabela recorded the highest positivity rate of 36.3% from 25.7% last July 23. Meanwhile, the positivity rate in the National Capital Region slightly increased to 15% from 14.2% on July 23.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has commended the local government of Pasig as he inspected its efforts to drive the uptake of booster shots in the city. The inspection was part of the Pinas Lakas campaign of the Marcos administration to boost vaccination rollout. The president has congratulated Pasig City Mayor Vico Soto for the orderly and organized launching of the campaign. The chief executive called on residents to encourage their friends and family to receive their booster shots so they will be more protected against COVID-19. The president also reminded the public to always wear their masks and wash their hands to prevent the spread of the virus. He nonetheless reiterated his earlier pronouncement that the government would no longer impose lockdowns.
Kayatin ninyo yung mga kasamahan ninyo, yung pamilya ninyo, lahat. Sabihin ninyo lahat na magpa-booster na para hindi nyo na kailangan alalahanin itong COVID na ito para masasabi natin dito sa Pilipinas ay tapos na. Wala naman tayong ibang panlaban dito kung hindi ang vaccine. Wag na po nating antayin na dumami pa ang mga kaso at maging mahirap na naman ang ating pagpunta sa trabaho, ang ating paglabas ng bahay. Ngunit naipangako ko sa inyo at uulitin ko, sa aking palagay, kaya naman nating makontrol ito, kaya hindi na tayo magla-lockdown. Wala na lockdown tayo. Basta't lalo na pag naging matagumpay ang ating rollout.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has named the new chiefs of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine National Police, and National Bureau of Investigation. Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles, in a message to reporters, announced the appointment of Lieutenant General Bartolome Bob Bacaro as the next AFP Chief of Staff, Police Lieutenant General Rodolfo Azurin Jr. as PNP Chief, and Medardo de Lemos as NBI Director. Bacaro is a Medal of Valor awardee, a graduate of PMA Class Maringal of 1988, and currently the commander of the Southern Luzon Command, or SOLCOM. The change of command for the next AFP chief is set for August 8. Based on RA 11709, General Bacaro will be the first CSAFP to be given a fixed 3-year term. Meanwhile, Police Lieutenant General Azurin is a member of the PMA Class Makatao of 1989 and is currently the commander of the Northern Luzon Police Area, composed of Regions 1, 2, 3, and the Cordillera Administrative Region, or CAR. For his part, De Lemos rose from the ranks of NBI. Angeles said his appointment as NBI Director is a strong indication of President Marcos's commitment to strengthening the system of meritocracy in promotion, placement, and hiring of government personnel.
Meanwhile, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has appointed his former election lawyer, George Garcia, as chairman of the Commission on Elections. In a message to reporters, Garcia showed his appointment paper signed by the president dated August 1st. Heading the COMELEC until February 2, 2029, he will replace Chairman Saidamen Pangarungan, who was bypassed by the Commission on Appointments before Congress adjourned in May. Like Pangarungan, Garcia was appointed commissioner by President Rodrigo Duterte, but his nomination was also bypassed by the CA. Garcia thanked President Marcos and vowed to strengthen the transparency and integrity of the poll body.
The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, assured the public that no important documents were damaged after a fire hit the 7th floor of its headquarters in Manila. The fire reached a second alarm before it was declared under control by firefighters. In photos shared by COMELEC spokesperson Attorney John Rex Laudianco, the fire hit the reception area of the poll body's Information and Technology Department. Computers were also damaged, but Laudianco said no critical information was stored in them. 5 personnel who were on duty when the fire started are all safe. The cause of the fire is still being determined, but Laudianco quoted the Bureau of Fire Protection as saying that there was no foul play and they are still looking into other possible angles. The 7th floor of the Palacio del Gobernador also holds the offices of the Executive Director and their Election and Barangay Affairs Department. The poll body has imposed a skeleton workforce and almost all employees work from home. Later on Mata ng Agila International, former Philippine President Fidel V. Ramos passes away at age 94. Amid U.S.-China tensions over Taiwan, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi kicks off her Asia tour with a visit to Singapore. And Ukrainian grain ship sails for the first time since the start of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Stay tuned for the details. Mata ng Agila International will be right back.
You're still watching Mata ng Agila International. Former President Fidel V. Ramos passed away over the weekend, as confirmed by his family. The former president was 94 years old. Vin Pascua reports.
Former President Fidel V. Ramos died at age 94 on Sunday, July 31st, according to an official statement from his family. Ramos, who served as the President of the Philippines from June 30, 1992 to June 30, 1998, succeeded the late President Corazon Aquino, who was installed after the 1986 People Power Revolution. The family of former President Ramos, through his son-in-law, Colonel Alex Zambrano of Sandigan PMA class of 1982, issued a statement on his demise on Sunday evening. The family thanked the public for respecting their privacy and said they will announce the wake and funeral arrangements for the former president in the next few days. Among the highlights of Ramos's career in the uniformed service was serving as chief of the Philippine Constabulary under his second cousin, the late former President Ferdinand Marcos. A graduate of the prestigious West Point Military Academy in the United States, he was also part of the Philippine Expeditionary Forces to Korea during the Korean War and led the Philippine contingent during the Vietnam War. Together with then Defense Chief Juan Ponce Enrile, he joined the 1986 EDSA Revolution, which ultimately ousted Marcos and led to the presidency of Corazon Aquino. He would, in various media interviews, describe his role in the peaceful revolt as his legacy and atonement. Succeeding Aquino, his administration was best known for its aggressive push for family planning and its Philippines 2000 program that aimed to industrialize the country. The peace agreement with the Moro National Liberation Front was also signed under his watch. Overall, his administration was defined by deregulation and liberalization policies, an economic surge, and a lower poverty rate, as well as a push to break monopolies in the transportation and communication sectors. As a private citizen, Ramos was among those who convinced then Davao City Mayor Rodrigo Duterte to run in the 2016 presidential elections. He would later serve as Duterte's envoy for talks with China. And for 32 years in a row, up until 2018, Ramos would repeat his famous EDSA People Power Jump to mark the anniversary of the historic bloodless revolt. Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Malacanang has declared a period of national mourning over the death of former President Fidel Valdez Ramos. Under the proclamation, the period of mourning will be observed for 10 days from the official announcement of the former president's death. According to Chapter 1 of Republic Act 8491, or the Flag and Heraldic Code of the Philippines, the Philippine flag shall be flown at half-mast as a sign of mourning on all buildings and places it is displayed in the Philippines and abroad. In his proclamation signed July 31st, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. said it is fitting to devote a period of national mourning and pay tribute to an esteemed leader who has dedicated his life to public service and has left a lasting mark on the country. The Ramos family has yet to disclose the details of the former president's wake and funeral.
Tributes have poured in for former President Fidel V. Ramos, who passed away on Sunday afternoon at the age of 94. How do FVR's colleagues remember him? Cez Alvarez files this report.
Filipinos recall the significant contributions of former President Fidel Valdez Ramos as colleagues mourn the passing of the country's 12th president. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has expressed his condolences to the family of the former president, whom he says has lived a full life as a military officer and public servant. In a Facebook post, President Marcos says his family joins the grief of Filipinos as the country lost not just a good leader, but also a member of the family. Ramos was a second cousin of the current president's father, former President Ferdinand Edralin Marcos Sr. According to the current chief executive, Ramos' presidency will always be cherished and will forever be enshrined in the hearts of the nation. Vice President Sara Duterte has also offered her condolences to the Ramos family. She has recognized Ramos' role in the Mindanao peace process, his efforts to champion Filipino competitiveness in the global arena, and his socio-economic agenda, dubbed as Philippines 2000. The Vice President also describes Ramos as a real patriot who encouraged men and women in uniform to value their integrity as public servant. Former Presidents Rodrigo Duterte and Joseph Estrada both expressed grief over the death of Ramos. Estrada, who was Ramos' vice president, said he was shocked to learn of Ramos' passing. He described Ramos as one of the most effective presidents in the nation's history who brought a different view of dealing with problems and overcoming them in the most pragmatic, cost-effective, and fastest way. Former President Duterte, for his part, said he's in deep grief over the passing of Ramos, whom he described as a great statesman, mentor, and friend. Ramos was among those who convinced Duterte to run for president in 2016. Likewise, lawmakers from the House of Representatives and the Senate also offered their condolences and grief on the death of Ramos. Philippine flags outside the two chambers buildings and other government offices were hoisted as half-mast to mourn the former leader. Says Alvarez, reporting for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
British Conservative frontrunner Liz Truss won another heavyweight endorsement as Tory members began a month of voting to decide the next occupant of 10 Downing Street. Truss's lagging rival Rishi Sunak vied to make up lost ground with a plan for future tax cuts and potentially to fund a future Women's Football World Cup in Britain after England's Lionesses won the European Championship. Truss attended Sunday's final against Germany and the first victor by any England football team in a major tournament since 1966 wiped Sunak's long-term tax-slashing plan off all the front pages except the Daily Telegraph. The Conservative Party contenders were going head-to-head in a members' hustings in the southwestern city of Exeter, the second of 12 such events before the winners announced on September 5. Sunak, a polished debater, needs to recapture momentum after Truss steamed into a strong polling lead on a platform of immediate tax cuts to address Britain's worst cost of living crisis in generations. However, Chancellor of the Exchequer Nadhim Zahawi joined other luminaries of Boris Johnson's cabinet in backing the Foreign Secretary against Sunak. Sunak's resignation from the scandal-tainted Johnson's cabinet helped spark a ministerial exodus that forced Johnson out last month. As they began receiving postal and online ballot forms, a large chunk of the roughly 200,000 Tory members are said by pollsters to nurse a grievance against Sunak.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi kicked off an Asian tour that has been shrouded in secrecy following an escalation in tensions with China over Taiwan. In a tweet, Pelosi says she'll lead a congressional delegation to the Indo-Pacific to reaffirm America's unshakable commitment to their allies and friends in the region. Her itinerary includes Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, and Japan, which will see the U.S. House Speaker and Indo-Pacific leaders holding high-level meetings about furthering shared interests and values. The trip will also focus on mutual security, economic partnership, and democratic governance in the Asia-Pacific. Though her tweet did not mention a possible visit to Taiwan, the Taiwanese broadcaster TVBS reported, citing sources, that Pelosi will arrive in Taipei tomorrow morning. For its part, China once again warned of serious consequences if Pelosi visits Taiwan.
佩洛西众议长如果赴台，将是对中国内政的粗暴干涉。 严重损害中国主权和领土完整，肆意践踏一个中国原则，严重威胁台海和平稳定，严重破坏中美关系，导致非常严重的事态和后果。
Chinese state media has claimed Pelosi might play a dangerous and risky move by trying to fake a refueling or emergency excuse to land in Taiwan. Earlier, China's People's Liberation Army posted on the social media Weibo that it should get ready for war.
Nikkei Asia reported that the U.S. military is moving assets, including aircraft carriers and large planes, closer to Taiwan ahead of an anticipated but unconfirmed visit by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The news agency said the military was initially opposed to the Speaker's visit, but now looks to be creating a buffer zone for Pelosi's plane in case she decides to go ahead with a controversial stop. Naval assets in the region include the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan, which has returned to the South China Sea after making a port call to Singapore last week. The amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli, which is off Okinawa, and USS America, which is forward deployed to Sasebo, Japan, are also nearby. Meanwhile, the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, landing helicopter duck USS Essex, and 36 other warships and 3 submarines are in Hawaii, taking part in the Rim of the Pacific exercise, which will end on Thursday. Flight tracking websites also show that 2 HC-130J Combat King the seconds have arrived in Okinawa from Anchorage. They were accompanied by multiple KC-135 Stratotankers, a type of aerial refueling aircraft.
Officially designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism by the U.S. State Department over its sanctions in Ukraine would limit the ability of the White House to exempt some transactions with Russia from Western penalties. This was what the New York Times reported, citing a senior U.S. official. The paper said the U.S. Senate, Speaker of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, as well as the Ukrainian Parliament unitedly support a resolution calling on the State Department to recognize Russia as a sponsor of terrorism. But U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken himself is not so sure about backing the resolution. The paper said these exemptions could include ensuring food exports from Russia are not disrupted by sanctions. The State Department currently lists Iran, Syria, Cuba, and North Korea as state sponsors of terrorism. Moreover, RT News quoted the Times as saying, designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism could completely sever the already constrained diplomatic ties between Moscow and Washington. State Department officials were said to view the designation as the nuclear option. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said this month that labeling Russia a state sponsor of terrorism would have negative consequences for that already fractured bilateral ties.
Ukraine said the strongest shelling by Moscow so far of the southern city Mykolaiv killed a grain tycoon, as Russia claimed that an attack from a drone wounded 6 personnel at the headquarters of its Black Sea Fleet in annexed Crimea. President Volodymyr Zelensky then announced Ukrainian armed forces are ready to respond as the Russian army seeks to strengthen its positions in the occupied territory of southern Ukraine.
Зараз російська армія намагається посилити позиції в окупованих районах півдня нашої країни, збільшує активність на відповідних напрямках. Частину російських сил з їхніх позицій на сході перекидають на південь, на Херсонщину та в Запорізьку область, але це їм там не допоможе. Жоден з російських ударів не залишається без відповіді від наших військових і розвідників. Збройні сили України готові відповідати на будь-яку нову активність окупантів. Стратегічно Росія має шанси.
Turkey announced that the first shipment of Ukrainian grain left the port of Odessa this morning, as Kyiv said the brutal shelling by Moscow of the southern city of Mykolaiv had killed an agriculture tycoon. The Turkish ministry confirmed in a statement that the ship Rezoni has left the port of Odessa, bound for Tripoli in Lebanon. It is expected in Istanbul on August 2nd. It will then continue its journey after it has been inspected in Istanbul. The Turkish ministry also said that other convoys would follow, which would respect the maritime corridor and the agreed formalities. The Joint Coordination Center, the organization overseeing the grain exports, said the Razoni is carrying over 26,000 metric tons of maize. The Turkish ministry also tweeted that they hope this process will continue without interruptions and problems. They also vowed to do what was necessary with the hope that the agreement between the parties would lead to a ceasefire and lasting peace. The European Union and NATO welcomed the departure of a grain shipment from Ukraine as a first step towards easing the food crisis caused by the ongoing Moscow-Kyiv conflict. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told the reporters that the departure of the first ship is a good opportunity to test the effectiveness of the mechanisms that were agreed upon during talks in Istanbul. The blockage of deliveries from warring Russia and Ukraine, two of the biggest grain exporters, has contributed to soaring food prices, hitting the world's poorest nations especially hard. Last month, both sides signed a landmark deal with Turkey and the United Nations aimed at relieving the global food crisis. Coming up, U.S. President Joe Biden tests positive for COVID-19 again. New York City declares monkeypox a public health emergency. And Russian President Vladimir Putin praises Russia's naval capabilities on the country's Navy Day. Mata ng Agila International will be right back. Don't go away.
Ngayong linggo sa Cine Throwback.
The year is 1931, but the world is still stuck in the steam age.
Pops? It should have worked by now. Do you feel anything?
That is precisely what I'd like to know.
Ngayong linggo, alas 12 ng tanghali. Dito lang sa Net 25.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together sa Net 25.
And we are back with more stories here on Mata ng Agila International. In other news, Governor Andy Beshear says rescuers in Kentucky are taking the search effort door to door in worsening weather conditions as they brace for a long and grueling effort to locate victims of flooding in the state's east. Some areas in the mountainous region are still inaccessible following flooding that turned roads into rivers, washed out bridges, swept away houses, and killed at least 26 people. Poor cell phone service is also complicating rescue efforts. Governor Beshear says this is one of the most devastating, deadly floods the state has seen in recent history. He says rescue efforts are going door to door to find, again, as many people as they can, even through the rain. The flooding was caused by torrential rain that began on Wednesday. The governor recently raised the death toll to 26, tweeting that the number would rise further.
President Joe Biden has tested positive for COVID-19 for a second time. His White House doctor attributes the result to rebound positivity from treatment the U.S. chief received. U.S. presidential physician Kevin O'Connor wrote in a memorandum that Biden tested positive late Saturday morning by antigen testing, following 4 consecutive days of negative tests, and will reinitiate strict isolation procedures. In a tweet, Biden seemed to seek to minimize the situation. He says, "Folks, today I tested positive for COVID again. This happens with a small minority of folks. I've got no symptoms, but I am going to isolate myself for the safety of everyone around me. I'm still at work and will be back on the road soon."
The monkeypox outbreak is still a major concern among health officials in the United States. Government leaders in New York City say the city is the epicenter of the outbreak and has declared it a public health emergency. Joanne Soriano has the details.
On Saturday, New York City Mayor Eric Adams and the city's Department of Health and Mental Hygiene Commissioner declared a public health emergency due to the monkeypox outbreak. Officials say New York City is currently the epicenter of monkeypox infections in the U.S. The declaration will allow the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to amend provisions of the health code to help slow the spread of monkeypox. The mayor's office estimates that approximately 150,000 New Yorkers may currently be at risk for monkeypox exposure. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report, updated on July 29th, New York State is leading the number of confirmed monkeypox cases at 1,345. California is second at 799. In the U.S., confirmed monkeypox cases stand at 5,189 as of July 29. Joanne Soriano, New York, New York. Baton ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Offering confidential vaccination, the District of Columbia encourages residents to pre-register to get vaccinated as it opens another monkeypox inoculation clinic. Rosel Faria reports.
Here in Washington, D.C., another monkeypox vaccination clinic is opening. D.C. Health Department encourages residents to continue pre-registering for a monkeypox vaccination appointment. With 3 sites now open, residents are able to choose which one they want to visit. On Saturday, July 23, D.C. Health's new single-dose strategy allowed for more than 5,000 vaccination appointments to be offered to eligible residents. Monkeypox vaccinations are confidential, and district residents can pre-register for monkeypox vaccination appointments by visiting preventmonkeypox.dc.gov. All residents are invited to pre-register for a vaccination appointment, and those who are not currently eligible will be contacted if eligibility changes and appointments are available. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C., Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Mali's army-led government urges French President Emmanuel Macron to abandon his neo-colonial and patronizing attitude as relations break down further between Paris and Bamako.
Le gouvernement de la transition a appris avec une profonde indignation des propos tenus par le président de la République française, Emmanuel Macron, lors de sa tournée en Guinée-Bissau le 28 juillet 2022. En effet, au cours de sa conférence de presse, le chef de l'État français a réitéré des accusations erronées en affirmant que les autorités maliennes entretiennent des relations avec un groupe paramilitaire sans jamais apporter de preuves, malgré les démentis des autorités de la transition.
Colonel Abdoulaye Maiga, spokesperson for the Malian transitional government, said on public TV that the transitional government condemns with the utmost rigor the hateful and defamatory remarks by Macron, calling national and international opinion to witness such serious accusations. Maiga said Macron's words are likely to stir up ethnic hatred and undermine living together, cohesion, and harmony among Malians.
La France, qui a toujours œuvré à la division et à la partition de notre pays, est mal placée pour donner des leçons au Mali. Le gouvernement de la transition exige du président Macron d'abandonner définitivement sa posture néocoloniale, paternaliste et condescendante pour comprendre que nul ne peut aimer le Mali mieux que les Maliens eux-mêmes.
Russian President Vladimir Putin delivered an astounding speech at the 83rd anniversary of the Navy Day Parade, which kicked off at Kronstadt, a naval port city near St. Petersburg.
We need to rely on our capabilities, and anyone who'd like to endanger our sovereignty will get a strong response.
This year's naval parade on the Neva River featured more than 40 warships and submarines. The aerial part of the ceremony was composed of 42 aircraft and helicopters, including the BE-200 Altair amphibious aircraft. The commander-in-chief also addressed members of the armed forces and boasted its newest Zircon hypersonic anti-ship cruise missiles.
We have a strong footprint. We have our naval, surface, submarine, coastal guard systems that we continuously improve. The hypersonic Zircon system has no match in the world. There are no barriers to this type of armament. Comrades, it will be commissioned, it will be sent to the Russian naval forces very soon. And the Admiral Gorshkov will be the first to get those systems. And
according to Putin, the frigate's exact deployment will be chosen in accordance with the interest of maintaining Russia's security. The Navy Day celebration dates back to the Soviet era, having been established in 1939. It was discontinued in 1980, but reinstated by President Putin in 2003.
In a recent housing sales report, U.S. home sales dropped to their lowest level since April of 2020. Anna Cui tells us more.
New home sales in June fell to the lowest level since April 2020 due to a declining builder sentiment, according to the National Association of Home Builders. New home sales are down 13.4% in 2022 on a year-to-date basis. Builders saw sales decline significantly as buyers back out of contracts due to being priced out of the market on higher mortgage rates. And with another interest rate hike by the Fed by 0.75 percentage point for the second straight month, many wonder how it will continue to affect the housing market. Some experts say it will unlikely cause any further damage to mortgage rates, predicting home sales will soon stabilize. We could be seeing a near end of the pandemic-driven housing market conditions as numbers of new single-family home inventory start to climb up. According to NAHB, it remained elevated at a 9.3-month supply, up 60.3% over last year, with 457,000 available for sale. The median sales price dipped to $402,400 in June, down 9.5% compared to May, but it is up 7.4% compared to a year ago. Year over year to date, new home sales fell in all 4 regions in the U.S., down 12.1% in the Northeast, 24.8% in the Midwest, 12.6% in the South, and 9.6% in the West, according to NAHB. Here in Las Vegas, over 2,600 single-family homes were sold in June, which is down 8.2% from May and down 24.7% from June 2021, according to a recent report from LasVegasRealtor.com. New home inventory was 4,674 in June, up almost 16% from May and about 22% year over year. Industry experts say current mortgage rates is helping to cool down the demand for home purchases. If this trend continues, some are hoping to see a resemblance of the pre-pandemic market conditions in the near future. Anna Cui, Las Vegas, Nevada, Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Caracas, Venezuela's capital city, is a commercial and cultural center in a northern mountain valley that is considered a paradise to erratic and agile species, hummingbirds. Alberto Blanco Davila of the Topetipuy Ecological Garden studies the behavior of hummingbirds and provides them with water troves. He says almost 100 of hummingbirds species have been seen in Venezuela. Undeniably, Caracas has been evolving into a habitat where different species of hummingbirds are being welcomed and treated well. On average, Davila uses a mixture of 3 kilos of sugar and water per day for the hummingbirds to intake. Every kilo produces 5 liters of nectar. And from May to July, Davila doubles the quantity of mixture as he expects numerous species of hummingbirds to migrate to the capital city. Deemed a privileged city by its residents, Caracas takes pride in being one of the most biodiverse cities in the world.
Having finished collecting all the world's real animals, Munster Zoo has presumably moved on to robots. The famous German zoo now features its first robot dog exhibit with Yuki, the robot dog. The Boston Dynamics Good Boy had been loaned to the Munster University of Applied Sciences and is being used as part of an experiment to see if Germans can treat robots like real animals.
Zwischen Lebewesen, echten Lebewesen und einem Roboter.
Kids and even adults are curious but happy to play with Yuki, which uses its smart sensors and infrared cameras to interact with humans. Next up, Elon Musk responds to Twitter's lawsuit over $44 billion deal. England secures its first ever European Championship with a win over Germany. And at Capitol Hill in Washington, Street Fair celebrates Asian heritage. Find out later when Madana Agila International returns.
Open for Business with Cesar Vallejos every Sunday, 9 p.m. Pilipinas at saan mang panig ng mundo, ihanda na ang shopping list nyo dahil narito na ang online shopping show kung saan ang hanap nyo, meron dito. Narito na ang Shopping All the Way with Jojo A. Eat na hit? We have it! May sayawan, tawanan, pati naiyakan. Pati pets nyo mag-i-enjoy dito. But wait, there's more. Dahil pati celebrity sellers, makikipag-online selling din. At hindi lang yan, dahil may chance kayong makabili ng collectible items mula sa inyong mga paboritong artista. Kaya what are you waiting for? Add to cart na! Shopping All the Way with Jojo A. Opening soon sa Net25.
In business news, New York correspondent Bobby Soriano reports on how the U.S. continues to confront fears of a recession.
Official data this week is indicating that the U.S. economy is in recession. Well, it kind of depends on who you ask. The data, according to the U.S. Commerce Department, showed that gross domestic product declined at an annual rate of 0.9% the second quarter of 2022, following a bigger drop in the first 3 months of the year. Historically, 2 quarters of negative growth is viewed as a strong signal that a recession is underway. President Biden insisted that the U.S. economy is on the right path. Nevertheless, American families continue to feel the bite from sky-high inflation. As consumer prices continue to go up, the U.S. consumer needs to cut back on purchases to stay on budget. Lower demand of products then leads to workers being let go, leading to even lower spending power by consumers, which leads to a national downturn in economic activity where few are able to buy anything and few are able to produce anything, otherwise known as a recession. Now, to combat the inflation of consumer prices, the U.S. Central Bank has been raising interest rates. The hope is that by increasing the base federal interest rate, businesses will slow down their expansion and allow for inflation to cool off in a controlled manner without affecting consumer spending power as much as mass unemployment would. But the Federal Reserve must be very careful with raising interest rates, as a rate hike that is too aggressive could also lead to a huge jump in unemployment, as businesses try to find a way to cut spending in the face of increased borrowing costs. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell agreed with President Biden and other economists to say that GDP figures are inconsistent with other strong data to suggest a recession is inevitable. But he also acknowledged that the path to cooling down price pressures without causing a downturn or a big jump in joblessness continues to narrow. Bobby Soriano, Matanang Agila International, New York, New York. Trusted, connected, on point.
Elon Musk filed a counter-suit to fight back against Twitter's lawsuit, which demands he be held to his $44 billion buyout deal. Musk's counter-suit was submitted along with a legal defense against Twitter's claim that the Tesla and SpaceX billionaire is contractually bound to complete the deal he inked in April to buy Twitter, the Chancery Court in the state of Delaware said in a notice. The notice also indicated that 164-page filing was submitted as being confidential, meaning the documents were not accessible to the public. But under court rules, a redacted version may be published in the near future. A judge has ordered a 5-day trial over Twitter's lawsuit against Musk to begin on October 17. Musk wooed Twitter's board with a $54.20 per share offer. But then he announced in July he'd be terminating their agreement on allegations that the firm misled him regarding its tally of fake and spam accounts. In response, Twitter sued Musk, saying his fake account claims were a distraction and demanding that he go forward with a deal he had agreed to. Twitter has urged shareholders to endorse the deal, setting a vote on the merger for September 13. Wearing his famous jersey number 9, Uruguayan international scorer Luis Suarez had his sweet and heartfelt celebration back home, where his career all started after rejoining National. Having landed on a private jet owned by his friend and former Barcelona teammate Lionel Messi, star striker Suarez felt nervous and emotional, seeing not only his family and friends, but also some of his avid celebrity fans who welcomed him from the airport. To loosen up the moment, a cheering crowd followed him in a long caravan heading to the Grand Park Central Stadium, where he signed his contract as a new player of National. This remarkable event was described as the most important signing in Uruguayan football history. Ending his speech, Suarez ignited the hope of the fans of their team, saying, and we quote, "From today begins a new challenge, a new dream, and let's hope to see us in November celebrating a few titles."
England won a major women's tournament for the first time, as Chloe Kelly's extra-time goal secured a 2-1 victory over Germany at a sold-out Wembley. Here's Jericho Season to tell us more.
England manager Serena Wiegman said the world will change for her players after the Lionesses won Euro 2022 with 2-1 extra-time victory over Germany at sold-out Wembley on Sunday in front of a crowd of over 87,000. For any match in the history of the European Championships, Chloe Kelly prodded home the winner in the 110th minute to deliver England women's first ever major tournament win. The world will change, we know that, said Wiegman, whose post-match press conference was interrupted by the England squad singing "Football's Coming Home." We change society, and that's what we want. That's so much more than football. Winning is what we are here for. Our job is to do as good as possible. But through football, you can make changes in society, and that's what we are here for. Kelly only just made Wiegman's squad after fighting back from a ligament tear to be fit in time for the tournament, and made herself a national hero by being in the right place to pounce when Germany failed to clear a corner. England had enough left in the tank to finally get the job done, as Germany failed to deal with the second ball from a corner, and Kelly's telescopic right leg flicked the ball home. Queen Elizabeth II led the tributes to the Lionesses, calling them an inspiration for girls and women today and for future generations. After decades of disappointment, a major tournament trophy has come home for England fans. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, this is Jericho Sison for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
In Washington, D.C., an annual street fair brings Asia to the Capitol Hill grounds. Arlene Ocampo reports.
International Cultural Awareness Month is celebrated every year here in Washington, D.C. Today is a celebration of Asian heritage here at the Fiesta Asia Street Fair at Capitol Hill. Fiesta Asia Street Fair began in 2006 and is in conjunction with Asian Heritage Month commemorations and is an anchor partner of Passport DC presented by Cultural Tourism DC. There are many things to see and participate in, from live performances, craft exhibits, food vendors, and many more. With the wide spread of things to experience, hope you enjoyed your trip around Asia without leaving the city. Arlene Ocampo, Matanang Agila International, Washington, D.C., trusted, connected, on point.
Now here's what happened today in history. In 1966, a student and ex-Marine fired down from the clock tower of the University of Texas at Austin. The gunman, Charles Whitman, started suffering serious mental issues after his mother left his father. He had reportedly told his psychiatrist that he was thinking about going up the tower and shooting people, which he ultimately carried out. Considered one of the worst mass murders in the public area in the U.S. or in U.S. history, the incident left 14 dead and 32 wounded. In 1981, MTV debuted. It went on the air for the first time ever with the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll." MTV went on to revolutionize the music industry and become an influential source of pop culture and entertainment in the United States and the rest of the world. And in 1996, the epic fantasy novel A Game of Thrones was released. It was the first book in George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series about feuding medieval noble families. The series eventually became a huge hit, selling millions of books and spawning a blockbuster HBO series, which is known for its elaborate plots and large casts.
Now, before we end tonight's broadcast, here's a quote from American memoirist Maya Angelou for your Monday motivation. You cannot use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. You should know this. You're an artist.
That is so amazingly true based on experience, because the more you share, the more it gets people to be creative too. And then they keep sharing. And it just keeps flowing.
I know. And creativity is one form of learning. The more you learn, the more you realize there's so much more to learn.
Exactly.
It just never stops. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I'm CJ Hero.
And I'm Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.